Welcome, everybody, to our deep dive. This time, it's the history of bisexuality. We're going to be looking at how different cultures throughout time have viewed bisexuality and attraction across genders. And for sources, we'll be using excerpts from the Wikipedia article called History of Bisexuality, a really cool piece from Literary Hub called Nope, Not a Trend.
Yeah.
And then we'll touch on some scientific perspectives from the Pacific Center for Sex and Society and Imperial College London.
It's going to be fascinating, I think, to really look into how bisexuality has been, how can I say, perceived, and also how those perceptions have changed over time.
Right, exactly. Like we always talk about like how much, our own modern understanding of sexuality is projected onto the past.
Right.
And, it's not always accurate. So to kick things off, I think let's go all the way back to ancient Greece.
Okay. Yeah.
And, we've talked a little bit about ancient Greece before, but
Yeah.
what's interesting is they didn't really have these rigid categories of sexual orientation that we do today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. The focus wasn't so much on who you were attracted to, but it was more about the role you played in a sexual relationship,
Oh, interesting.
whether you were what they call the active or passive partner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, Plato, for example, he believed both men and women could be either the active or passive role.
Hmm.
So it was much more fluid in that sense.
So a much more, I guess, fluid concept of sexuality than we're used to.
Right.
But I guess it's important to note, though, that, even within this more fluid system, male dominance was still, like, very much the norm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Aristotle, for example, he saw women as strictly passive partners.
Yeah. There was definitely still a power dynamic, a hierarchy.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So these ancient Greek ideas, I think, kind of highlight, like, how social hierarchies and power dynamics really intertwine with, like, how sexuality is perceived and experienced.
Definitely.
So I guess why don't we jump over to ancient Rome now?
Okay. Yeah.
That's a fun one. Roman society, it was, well, I mean, it was known for being, pretty open, right?
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
And that seems like it extended to sexuality as well.
It did.
At least for freeborn Roman men,
Right.
It was considered totally acceptable for
Yeah.
them to have relationships with both men and women.
Right. And there are lots of writings and historical accounts that point to this.
Yeah, for sure.
But as with most things in Roman society, social status played a crucial role in all of this.
Hmm.
So like having relationships with people of lower standing, that you could actually like damage your reputation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much about like being bisexual or not, but more about like maintaining your social standing through your choices of partners.
Exactly. It all boils down to, reputation.
Reputation.
Yeah. And the importance of, maintaining the social order in Roman culture.
Right, right. So very, very different from like, modern ideas of sexuality and like identity.
Right.
So let's shift gears completely now and journey eastward to ancient Japan.
Okay.
I've always been really curious about how sexuality was viewed in Japanese culture.
Yeah. It's a very rich history.
Mhm.
And, before the modern era, Japan actually had very few laws that restricted sexual behavior at all.
Mm.
And there were practices like shudu, which referred to relationships between, older men and younger boys, who they called wakashu.
Wakashu.
Wakashu, yeah.
What does that term mean?
It basically translates to, attractive teenagers, often those going through some kind of apprenticeship
Hmm.
or mentorship.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were considered to possess a certain beauty and were believed to be desired by both men and women.
Interesting. So these like relationships were like accepted as like a natural part of life.
Yeah, in many circles they were.
Hmm.
For instance, open bisexuality was even practiced within Buddhist institutions in Japan.
Hmm.
So it was all part of, I guess you could say, like a more holistic view of human experience,
Oh, that's so interesting.
where they didn't really impose strict categories of sexuality.
Right. So different from the way we tend to think about things today.
Exactly, yeah.
So we've talked about ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Japan. I'm curious, before we move on from like ancient cultures, what about ancient China?
Okay, yeah.
What was their take on same-sex relationships?
Well, historical records suggest that same-sex relationships were actually quite common, especially among the elite. But they often, how can I say, they use subtle language
Hmm.
and metaphors to describe these relationships.
Metaphors like what?
Well, for example, the term long yang
Mm-hmm.
was used to refer to men who had, romantic or sexual relationships with other men. And there's a fascinating story about Emperor A, who was so devoted to his male lover Dongxin that he actually considered giving Dongxin the throne.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is, and this story it gave rise to the phrase "breaking the sleeve,"
Oh.
which refers to this tender moment where Emperor I cut off his sleeve rather than disturb Dongxin, who had fallen asleep on it.
Oh, that's kind of like sweet in a way.
It is. It's a powerful image of love and devotion,
Yeah.
regardless of gender.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like ancient China necessarily had like fixed identities like gay or
No, no, not in the way that we think of them today. The
Mhm.
emphasis was more on the relationship itself,
relationship.
not on labeling individuals based on their attractions.
Got it, got it.
And actually, there's another great story that comes from a text called "Intrigues of the Warring States." It's about Mixixia and Duke Ling of Wei. Mixixia offered Duke Ling a half-eaten peach as a kind of a gesture of affection, and
Oh.
this became a symbol of their love.
It's amazing to see how all of these, ancient cultures, how they viewed same-sex relationships, as a normal part of the human experience.
Yeah,
And it really, I think, challenges like our modern tendency to, categorize and label everything.
it does. And as we move into the modern era, we'll see how scientific discoveries and evolving social norms really begin to, reshape our understanding of bisexuality.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been a fascinating look at ancient cultures and their views on bisexuality. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve into the modern era and see how things begin to shift.
Sounds good.
Wow, it's incredible how much our understanding of sexuality shifted, even just in the past century or so.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
As we move into the 20th century, we
Mhm.
start seeing these figures like Richard von Krafft-Ebing.
Alfred Kinsey and Fritz Klein, like all coming onto the scene. And they were like, pioneers in the field of sexology, but their views on bisexuality were, well, a product of their time.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
Krafft-Ebing, for instance, he actually introduced the term bisexual into the scientific lexicon.
Huh.
But he did so within the context of mental illness.
Oh, okay.
So he saw it as a kind of a deviation from the norm.
So not exactly a progressive viewpoint.
No, not at all.
But I guess even just like acknowledging its existence was a step forward, right?
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. He also recognized that bisexuality exists in nature, which is something we'll touch on later.
Okay.
But it was really Alfred Kinsey who revolutionized how we think about sexuality.
Okay.
He rejected these rigid categories of gay and straight,
Hmm.
and he introduced this idea of the Kinsey scale,
Right.
which presented sexuality as a spectrum.
That must have been pretty groundbreaking at the time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It completely changed the conversation.
And even though Kinsey himself, he actually preferred to use bisexual in its original like biological sense.
Right.
So like meaning like having both male and female biological characteristics.
Exactly.
But his work paved the way for a more fluid understanding of sexual orientation.
Absolutely.
And then we have Fritz Klein, who came along, and he kind of further expanded on Kinsey's ideas with the Klein sexual orientation grid.
Right, right.
And that takes into account not just attraction, but also like behaviors,
Yeah.
fantasies, emotional preferences, like the whole picture.
Total gamut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating, I think, to see how these researchers, each kind of building on the work of those who came before them,
Right.
how they helped to shift our understanding of sexuality.
Absolutely. It was a gradual process, but really important.
So from ancient views of fluidity to these like early attempts at scientific categorization, it's been quite a journey.
It has, yeah.
And speaking of journeys, the 1960s in the United States saw the rise of the LGBT rights movement.
Right.
And bisexual individuals were right there on the front lines.
They were, absolutely. They were instrumental in shaping the movement.
What are some examples of that?
Well, you have figures like Judith, J.D. Cooch, and Christine Kleberg who were protesting for equal rights. Way back in the early 60s, they were picketing the White House.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have taken incredible courage, especially back then.
It really did, yeah. And it wasn't just individuals. You had groups like the Student Homophile League
Right.
at NYU and Columbia, which was the first officially recognized gay student group in the U.S.
Mm.
And that really highlights, I think, the collective push for visibility
Yeah.
and equality.
It's a good reminder that these movements for social change, like they're really built on the bravery and dedication of countless individuals, right?
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there's the Stonewall Uprising,
Right.
which became this like pivotal moment in the fight for LGBT rights.
Absolutely a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crucial to remember that many of those who stood up against police harassment at the Stonewall Inn, they were bisexual. It was a fight for everyone's right to express their sexuality freely.
Absolutely. And speaking of Stonewall, we can't forget Brenda Howard, who's often called the Mother of Pride.
Yes, yes.
She not only helped coordinate the first Pride March, but she pioneered the idea of like week-long celebrations,
Right.
which, have become like the Pride events that we know and love today.
She really shaped the way we celebrate and advocate for LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah.
And then in the 1970s, bisexuality started to enter, mainstream media with publications like Newsweek and Time running articles on the topic.
I remember reading about that bisexual chic trend that Newsweek declared.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting how they framed it as like a fashionable trend.
Right.
Almost like it was something new and fleeting.
Yeah, and that's a really important point because this idea of bisexuality as a trend or a phase is something that's persisted, for decades.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly harmful.
Yeah, it's so dismissive. It just minimizes the real experiences of bisexual individuals.
Exactly.
But if we look at like modern research, it actually paints a very different picture.
It does.
Studies are showing that that bisexuality is more common among younger generations.
Right.
And while, some people might jump to the conclusion that this means it's a trend, I think it's more likely a reflection of growing acceptance and understanding of sexual fluidity.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right. Especially with like more visibility and representation of LGBTQ plus people in media and, online communities.
Yeah.
It's likely that young people just like feel more comfortable exploring and expressing their identities.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really challenges that old narrative of bisexuality as just a phase.
Right, right.
The Kinsey scale, which we talked about earlier, I think is really helpful in understanding this.
Yeah.
Because it shows that sexuality doesn't fit into neat boxes.
It's more like a spectrum, right, with
Yeah.
people falling at different points along it.
Precisely, yeah. And studies are backing this up. A 2015 YouGov study, for example, found that a growing number of young people, they see their sexuality as less fixed and more fluid. They don't feel the need to label themselves in these rigid ways.
That's a hopeful sign.
It is.
It suggests that we're like moving towards a more like accepting and inclusive understanding of sexuality.
I think so too, yeah. It's definitely moving in the right direction.
And what's even more interesting is that this fluidity isn't limited to humans.
Right.
If we look at the natural world, we see that bisexuality is actually quite common in many animal species.
It is, yeah.
Wait, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, for years, the existence of same-sex behavior in animals, it was actually used to argue against homosexuality in humans.
Mm-hmm.
People pointed to what they called the Darwinian paradox.
Okay.
And they claimed that same-sex attraction didn't make sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Right.
Because it didn't lead to reproduction.
Because it was seen as counterproductive to like the survival of the species.
Exactly, yeah. But newer research is challenging that assumption.
Okay.
Showing that same-sex behavior actually can have evolutionary benefits.
So what are like some examples of this in the animal world?
Well, you have the famous cases of male penguin couples raising chicks together.
Right.
And then in 2018, scientists observed the first documented case of sex between male spider monkeys.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it really challenges the idea that same-sex behavior is somehow unnatural.
Right.
Or goes against the laws of nature.
Yeah, for sure.
And it opens up this whole new way of understanding the role of sexuality in evolution.
Right.
One model called the bisexual advantage model suggests that animals with more fluid sexuality might actually have higher reproductive success.
Wait, higher reproductive success? How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. If you're not limited to partners of the opposite sex, you have a larger pool of potential mates to choose from.
So it increases your chances of finding a suitable partner.
Right.
And passing on your genes.
Exactly. And it's not just about numbers, though.
Okay.
It's also about adaptability. So in challenging environments, having a more flexible approach to mating could be a real advantage.
It's amazing to think that bisexuality, or at least like sexual fluidity, could have played a role in the survival and evolution of species.
It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
And it shows us that our understanding of sexuality, both in humans and in the natural world, is still evolving.
Yeah, for sure. This deep dive has already been like packed with so much information.
It has.
And new perspectives. It's incredible how much we've uncovered about the history of bisexuality, from like ancient cultural views to modern scientific insights.
Yeah.
And it really underscores the fact that bisexuality is not a new phenomenon. It's not a trend. It's not a phase.
Oh, definitely not.
It's a natural and valid expression of human sexuality that has existed like for as long as humans have.
Yeah.
So as we move into like the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious to kind of explore like what the future might hold.
Okay.
If sexuality truly is a spectrum, how might our understanding of relationships and identity continue to evolve? So we've seen how bisexuality has been viewed, throughout history, and how science is kind of challenging those like traditional notions of sexuality.
Right.
But what about the future? Like if we really embrace this idea of sexuality as a spectrum, how might our understanding of like relationships and identity evolve?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, we're already seeing this shift, especially among younger generations, toward a more fluid and accepting understanding of attraction.
Right.
And this could lead to some pretty profound changes in how we, define ourselves and form relationships.
I'm thinking about like, how we often view relationships as needing to like fit into these predetermined boxes.
Yeah.
You're either gay, straight, or maybe bisexual, and that label then like dictates the kind of relationship you're supposed to have.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
But what if those boxes become less rigid? What if we move beyond those labels and focus more on the individuals and the connections that they form?
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly challenge the traditional emphasis on monogamy, which has been the dominant model for so long.
Yeah, for centuries, really.
Right.
It would definitely challenge that.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing, a growing interest in polyamorous relationships.
Yeah.
Where people have, open and consensual relationships with multiple partners.
Yeah, that's a concept that I think still makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it is like it's interesting to think about how it challenges those assumptions about love and commitment.
It does. It really does.
Right.
It raises questions about whether those things are inherently tied to exclusivity or if they could exist in different forms.
Right.
And this shift in thinking about relationships, I think, it could also have implications for how we understand gender identity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we're already seeing this push for greater gender inclusivity, with the recognition of pronouns beyond he and she.
Yeah.
And a growing awareness of non-binary identities.
Exactly.
And it allows people to like express their gender identity in ways that feel more authentic to them.
Right.
Like breaking free from the constraints of traditional gender roles and expectations.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's exciting to imagine a future where individuals are free to explore both their sexuality and gender identity without fear of judgment or discrimination.
It is. And a world where relationships are built on mutual consent, respect, and authentic connection, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity.
Sure.
That's something worth striving for.
Absolutely. And while we can't like predict exactly how how things will
Mhm.
unfold, the
Mhm.
conversations we're having now about sexuality and gender and relation, like I really do think they're laying the groundwork for a more like inclusive and understanding society.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And perhaps, future generations will look back at our current struggles and see them as a necessary step
Hmm.
toward a more enlightened future.
Yeah.
A future where bisexuality is simply another facet of the beautiful diversity
Right.
of human experience.
Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of our exploration into the history of bisexuality.
It's been a journey.
We've journeyed from ancient cultures to modern science, and I hope you've emerged with a deeper understanding of this complex and often misunderstood
Yeah.
aspect of human sexuality.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you.
Likewise.
And remember, the exploration doesn't end here.
Right.
Keep questioning, keep
Mhm.
learning, and keep your minds open to the infinite possibilities
Yeah.
of human connection.
Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep diving deep, and keep those conversations going.